Three common misconceptions about highly sensitive people, HSPs, people that are being perceived as highly sensitive or just being vulnerable in general. I am still working on what we're going to change the phrasing to for highly sensitive people, but I think that we'll figure that out together. That's what I really think is going to happen. And because I'm not going to do it myself. I think a lot of people are sounding off in the comments that have a pretty good idea of what we could reframe it to and go with from there. But for right now, these are three common misconceptions about highly sensitive people who are being highly sensitive or the behavior is meeting the criteria of what we call highly sensitive, or just being vulnerable. And again, we'll get into the language of it later on, but three of the misconceptions, I won't give them all three of them to you like right off the bat, but we're gonna go one by one, and then I'm gonna just give you some examples of the language that is used or how it's being perceived. But the first thing that you need to understand about misconceptions is that there is an intent versus impact. So there is a miscommunication between what somebody is intending and the way that it lands. And this happens all the time. And while on this channel, we're gonna get out of meritocratic, blame or anything like that and just, deals like just solely with the scenario, and then we can start kind of naming things from there. But the intent versus impact gets switched up, and something in between it where somebody intended to say something ends up being a different impact than what they intended. And that is part of the misconception of what's going on. And there is, before anybody receives an external communication or anything like that, or anybody perceives a highly sensitive person within you who are watching this right now, you have had an intent versus impact within yourself. You intended something and you reacted to your emotions a lot differently than you thought you would. It can happen when we're watching a commercial. It can happen when we're waiting for somebody to text us back. Yeah. It can happen when somebody says something and we all of a sudden take it deeply personal, or it hurts us a lot more than we ever expected. And I think it's extremely important to hone in on your inner intent versus impacts as well as the outer as well while we go through this. And I believe that we've all heard this first one. This first misconception is that you are overreacting. Wait, you're coming in hot, coming in way too hot. And I think that response is usually when somebody views your emotions or your response to your emotions as disproportionate to what's going on in the scenario. And to even say that means that there is a proportionate way to act in this scenario. When we hear somebody yell, when we might even hear like table shuffle. I remember in the cafeteria in high school, you knew there was a fight going on when you would hear like table shuffling and like chairs tipping over and you're like, whoa, somebody's fighting. It feels disproportionate to you because you have a proportionate way of how you view everything in the scenario in the first place. So if somebody asks a question that seems a little bit sharp, or they take a little long to get back to you, or they have like an elevated tone, like that can be perceived as disproportionate or overreacting. And to read what I wrote here, number one, believing the person's emotions are disproportionate to you. The reaction to their emotions comes off as terse, loud, out of sync, or personal. And in that happening, you have to understand that, and this is the through line through this whole video. And this is to people that are experiencing somebody who might be a highly sensitive person, and to people that are highly sensitive people. The emotion or feeling that's happening when this person is expressing themselves feels proportionate to them. Okay? It feels proportionate to them. So we have to already accept that when we see something on the news, or we hear about this crazy thing went down, we're like, whoa, that's nuts. But in the scenario, it felt normal, it felt proportionate, it felt right for that person. So, and it's not to say that it is right, but it's to saying that that person was in a different frame than you. And the frame between you two is not disproportionate, it's just disparate, which means that it's different without comparison. So once you accept that there is a disparity emotionally between you and another person, and especially with expressing yourselves and how somebody is going to express themselves, all humans express themselves differently, that is the first thing to really accept. And the misconception that somebody is acting disproportionately to the scenario or the environment is to say that there is a proportionate way they should have been acting anyways, which is not what their frame is, or not what our frame is. And so even when you see art, when you see people that have made art, you could say the art is disproportionate to anything. It shouldn't be here. Can't be in this gallery. This happened all the time with different cultures creating different art. And you would have galleries that just wouldn't show it because they felt that it was disproportionate to what they felt art was. And it's bringing about a merit and a critic and an ultimate condemning judgment to art, which is entirely subjective. Everybody's art is going to be different. Everybody's expression is going to be different. And to say that somebody is acting over the top is to say that you are on the baseline, when somebody could actually be radically discomforted by you not saying anything about something that's going on. I think this happens, I know that this happens a lot with people that, I've seen this happen a lot with strikes, where a union will go on strike. Everybody thinks everything is hunky-dory. I remember one time in college, all the clerical staff went on strike. I didn't know anything was going on. All of a sudden, they got a picket line outside, and they got their signs, and they got the bullhorn going. Somebody could see that as, wow, they're being really loud and disruptive. But to them, this is exactly what needs to be done right now. And they're seeing it as proportionate to what's going on, very appropriate to what needs to be said. They are holding the moment accountable. So as highly sensitive people, I know that sometimes it can come off as, we're coming in hot, we're over the top, we're, all these things. However, for highly sensitive people, it feels totally normal. It's not perceived as normal, but it feels absolutely proportionate to the situation. But it seems disproportionate to other people that may be a little, like they may be expressing something more even keel or even docile, that we pick up on as docile. And what I have written here is, the person having the emotions is already valid. The reaction to their emotions is what other people can address or what we can address. And it's what you can address if you're having the emotions as well. And that's the other thing with being an HSP or being in a moment of vulnerability, is that you have this situation where you're reacting to your own emotions. And the reaction within yourself, depending on the filter or the awareness that you have of yourself, you might just let the floodgates go, just boom. We're yelling now, or we're crying, or we're pointing fingers and blaming, or we're asking a very, very poignant question that we feel needs to be asked right now. I need to know this right now, dog. I have to know this from you. That obviously can be seen as overreacting, but in the frame of the person that's experiencing the emotion, it is not. So the thing to understand is that it's proportionate to you. Being proportionate is subjective entirely. The second thing is that we already said this, the way somebody feels is never disproportionate to them. The feeling is disparate, meaning it's different with no comparison. Now you see the trains in the backdrop, those ones that you hear in the videos, that's where they are. They're in the backdrop right there. So you don't think that I'm going crazy and just saying, oh, that rumble that you hear in this video is from a train. They're in the back. They're actually real. And I think the thing for HSPs when this is happening, or we're having this situation where we feel like we're overreacting, that is the time to check in with ourselves. Because what can happen in any situation, regardless of highly sensitive or not, is that we want to immediately find an external solution, or kind of, if you think about like handball or like racquetball, we need something to bounce off the wall. We need a soundboard or something. And it's like, no, I think what needs to happen is we need to just meditate, or like be still, be maybe a little bit isolated, or something, like in a quiet space where we can just get in tune with what's going on in our head, and then reflect, and then figure out what's the next step. Because the heat of the moment, for highly sensitive people watching this, the heat of the moment is where things can get really sped up. They can go fast. And the idea of somebody overreacting is you have to understand that it is 1,000% proportionate to them, and it feels normal. Like it is making art, like waking up and writing, feels normal. Like, and this is not. There was something I think one time, me working as an actor and a voiceover person and working in art, I make my income from art, and that's essentially it. But with that comes the reality that you don't know where your next check is coming from. I'm okay with that. To some people, that's crazy. They don't even want to think about a fiber of that reality. It scares the crap out of them so much. So for everybody, their baseline is different. And that's just the reality of the way it is. The second misconception about highly sensitive people is that it is a weakness. And it is not. I think we already know that. And what I have written here, I want to get after what I have written is first, let's get at the inverse. There's a belief that appearing stoic or looking unaffected is a display of strength. In many cases, this can be useful because you're not showing your hand or you're playing a game to your advantage where if someone knows how you feel, they can weaponize it against you. What did I just describe? Anybody got it? Put the notes in the comments. What did I just describe? I described a zero-sum game. I described a competition where somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. There can be no tie. There will be no tiebreaker. However, my friends, this is life. Hi, welcome. It's not a zero-sum game. And displaying your emotions or expressing yourself. And again, I'm talking about this at just like baseline. We'll get into like mastering, emotional expression, or even the first step to just being aware of your emotional expression. What I'm just talking about is just like a baseline of just emotions being expressed. We are not living in a zero-sum game. This is not the Hunger Games. This is life. And to think that we are in a zero-sum game is really to start to engage with duality, to think that we are entirely separate from one another, when in reality, we're not. And we'll touch on non-duality a lot throughout this channel, because once you start to understand that you and I are standing underneath the same sun, well, that's a starting point. Then we can start from there, and we can start building from there. I know this is way too late to say this in the video. Hi, welcome to the Highly Sensitive Persons series on relationships. And this first video, I wanted to make it about the misconceptions, but we'll get to this at the end of the video as well. To think that somebody can take your emotions and weaponize them against you is a very real thing, and it's a very real fear. However, once you start to, and this is the thing to understand about perceiving sensitivity as a weakness or vulnerability as weakness. Once you understand your own tears, they can never be weaponized against you. Once you understand the depth and well of your heart, it can never be weaponized against you. It can never be, you can never put a mirror. I know when this happened for me, it was very recently actually. It's the reason why I can make these videos. You can never show me a mirror of my heart and make me feel bad about it. You just can't. There used to be a time where people would do that, or you're on the playground as a kid and they're like, you're weak because I saw you crying, and then it's like, oh, I guess I'm not. What? But now there's nothing that can't do it, because I know that I'm in the stages of knowing myself enough that I have no shame in who I am and who I'm being. That's a tough, and I'm still doing it every day, and that practices every day. And the idea is that when you start to get to know yourself, when you start to say, I like you, in the mirror, when you start to exercise self-love, there is really no such thing as weakness in the lexicon of expressing your emotions. If I use the word lexicon, right? In the arena of expressing your emotions, there is no right or wrong about it. There is, are you aware of it or not? Do you have a grasp on what you just said? Do you have an understanding of the intent and impact that just occurred here? And once you can start to tap them with that, then that's where the magic happens, or dare I say, that's where the stillness occurs. There is just a wild, disruptive calmness about you once you can get to that space. And when you are in a situation where people are weaponizing emotions, you gotta take a look at that space. Because it's not about emotions being weak or strong. It's about that space being a zero-sum game and somehow people weaponizing emotions against people. Carrying a poker face is for exactly what the name of it is, a poker game. When you're playing a game, that's when being, dead in the face is to your advantage. And when we're engaging in relationships and we're communicating with people, I always say this. I always say this. I've said this to a few friends recently, and I think about it all the time. Do you want to get into a friendship or relationship with somebody based off of your edited self? Based off of an edited version of you? No. Because then you have to have that edited version all throughout. They're expecting that person. You came as you are, and now they're expecting you to always be like that. So if you're editing your emotions, or you're turning the mixer up and down, and you're trying to come off as this particular person to appease the situation, then you're going to be expected to be that person all the time. And that can be not only a problem, but it becomes your way of being. You have to enter this place edited, which I don't know if that's the way you want to be. That's not a way I want to be. But the idea is that you then can't be your authentic self. And now we've entirely ruled out us being authentic in the situation. What you do with your emotions is up to you. How you process the feelings is the key. I bet you have intrusive thoughts, unexpected emotions, gut feelings, all types of things that you can't really control. We don't really have control over it. The key is what is the processing that you have right now? What kind of processor are you working with? The emotion hits, boom. Then what are we doing later? All right? Now, when you're working with youth, there is really like a limited processor. It is like everything. Like, like every insult that they can think of, they say it right to you. There's really no distillation system. It's just like, boom, I'm saying it. But as an adult, as a person who is starting to get more aware of their emotions, what does that processing look like for you? And everybody's process is different. The question is, what is it going to be for you? And I think it's really important when entering relationships, how are you going to be with that information or those emotions or those intrusive thoughts or those gut feelings? How are you going to respond to them, if at all? How do you process that? That is the key. Because if we're talking about feelings and emotions, everybody has them. So then if we're going with this misconception, everybody would then be seen as weak. But it's not. It's in respecting the fact that every emotion and feeling is valid. It's the way that we process it. And if we can carry space for other folks' emotions and feelings, we can do the same thing for ourselves, but also we can live in a world where there's space for that, as opposed to just ruling it out as weakness. Because then, if we're ruling it out as weakness, we're entering a zero-sum game. I'm just going to read the last thing I had here. So there is no weakness to having deep emotions and big feelings because we have them. You are strong simply for the fact that you have them. That is a sign of strength, just in having emotions and feelings and accepting them. I think that's a very big deal. The third misconception about highly sensitive people, or people who are being sensitive, or vulnerability, is that they are making it about themselves. Now, there is a reality where people can hijack a moment. Got a little different hairstyle for this series. But and I know I'm gonna get comments on my hair. I'm in a journey right now. This is the longest it's ever been in my life. I don't know what to do with it, but we're figuring it out as we go. There is a reality to people producing tears or certain emotions to hijack a situation and recenter it on them, or reverse Darvo, deflect and reverse victim order. And it's a play, again, in a zero-sum game, to redirect whatever attention away from somebody, or to redirect the attention to them, or to just basically a sleight of hand in whatever conversation is going on. The misconception about highly sensitive people is that they're doing this to game, to game feelings, and it's like, I think that a lot of people this resonates with a lot of people when I say, I will remove myself from a room when I feel that I'm gonna start crying. I don't want I don't want to disrupt the moment sometimes. And it's not because I see it as a form of weakness, it's just that I'm like, oh dear Lord, I gotta step out. I gotta take a walk. Or I gotta turn my face away because I don't want to interrupt other people's moments when that's happening. And this could be when a commercial is playing, crying when a memory flashes by, getting hypervigilant about solving a problem. The emotions are centered in the person that's experiencing them. The expression is them just processing the emotions. I don't know how to explain it. That we talked about when I was leaving my friend's father's funeral, and I suddenly just started breaking down crying. I turned away from everybody because this guy's celebration of life. I don't want to make it about me. I know that there are times where people have totally gamed with emotions and feelings and try to make it about themselves. I think as a highly sensitive person, for me, usually the self-centering part of it is in the art. That's when I step away and I'm like, I'm gonna write this song, or I'm gonna, draw this picture, or whatever it may be. I'm gonna, write this title in my book. And writing titles in my book is like an artsy thing for me, because I'll like take Jelly Roll pens and gussy it up and make it all colorful. So when I'm flipping through the pages, I'd be like, oh, there's that song. So that's the self-centeringness for me, is like when I make it about me is when I do the art and I'm like, I'm gonna tell this story, or I'm gonna write this short story, whatever it may be. That is the self-centering for me. I do not believe that HSPs come into a room thinking, yes, we're gonna show these people some feelings and make it all about us. I really, really believe that the way a lot of people process their emotions is privately them. And I don't think a lot of it is about this externalism of it. It's just the way that the pistons are firing off in our heart and neural pathways. And you get caught up in the emotions sometimes. You gotta take a step out, or at least I do. What all of this really boils down to is self-awareness, or you, who may not be an HSP, being aware of the gravity and emotional physics that somebody carries being an HSP. How can you build a space for that? And the way, I won't really give a story with this, but I will tell you that everybody's processor is different. And we talked about repressing emotions. And if somebody has a nuclear explosion going on inside of them and they're just sitting there, just one of two things is happening, all right? Either they're repressing the emotion, or they are on a different level of processing it. They are processing it as best they can. And some people are holding on for dear life. Some people are just like, I think I know what's going on here. And we're gonna sit with this and figure it out. You are not the one outside of them to tell them what they should or shouldn't do with that emotion. Everybody is processing differently. The thing that will be helpful for you to understand is that this is the best example I can give is when you see somebody have a reaction and a room may respond to them and be like, whoa, that person went from 0 to 60. You have to understand that people are already at 58 sometimes, and they're just holding on for dear life. Or they're processing, and that process gets interrupted. It can be anything, but reserving space for people's means of processing emotions is the key. Because if somebody's blowing up, if somebody's taking a long time to get back to you, whatever it may be, whatever the misconception that may be applied to this HSP, you have to understand that it's largely to do with the way that your frame is trying to fit this person in there. And a lot of HSPs don't fit into other people's frames. They fit into their frame. And how do we process those frames being in the same room? That is the key. So I will leave you with that. This video has already gotten fairly long, but this is the first of 6 on relationships and HSPs, and I'll figure out a title for this down the line. But this is about the misconceptions of HSPs and all that other stuff. I just want to make sure I get everything. Oh yeah, being told to just chill, being told you'll get over it. This is a big thing here. You have to understand that when people are responding to you, is like a big thing that's happening is they're projecting their idea of what is proportionate onto you, and you may be doing the same thing as well. So again, I come back to the key of this whole situation is being aware of how do other people process their emotions and how do you process your emotions. All right, hope you got something helpful out of this. We will see you in the next video.